to say again that I'd like to thank Dr. Tanya G out of Vancouver for joining us, and Tanya practices in traditional Chinese medicine. And we also have Michael Ballard, who is from Toronto. And Michael, you are a resiliency expert as well as a positive outcome specialist. So two perfect guests to have with me on this show. So welcome and thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So today what we want to talk about is resiliency, and I did say that we would have, 3 steps, and so I think through our conversation, each of us will come up with those 3 steps that we see that could be helpful to people. So maybe I can open it up to you first, Tanya, and then you, Michael, to let's talk about what your interpretation of resiliency is first, because I think everybody may have a little bit of a different slant on what is resiliency and who has resiliency.
Oh, that's a fantastic question.
Tanya?
Great question.
Thank you, Janelle. Thank you, Michael. So to give a little bit of background to qualify the answer is I've been practicing traditional Chinese medicine for 21 years, and the foundation is of Eastern philosophy. So I spent many years as a Buddhist, and this has also influenced my knowledge of how we could restore health and to foster resilience. So for resilience to me is about the ability to rebound, to come back to center, to be more vital after life's setbacks. And loss is going to be anything from losing a job, a partner, a pet, a family member, a lover, things like this. So I'm happy to be a part of this today because loss and resiliency is a part of life, and how we can rebound and recuperate out of a loss is an individual experience. So I'm really happy to be speaking with Michael and yourself, Janelle, and to everyone who's listening, because there's so many different ways on how we can recuperate to restore resilience. So I hope that I'll be able to share something useful today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Michael.
So my journey to resiliency was I had a chronic illness diagnosis where an expert with good intentions said, there's nothing you can do. So it's like, oh, geez, thanks for that. Of course, in my family, it's okay to visit. There's nothing you can do. But I was greatly encouraged to never live there. And then fast forward, I had a cancer diagnosis, and then I had a 7-year battle with 2 bouts of cancer, and then I had a failed medical procedure. And I kept saying to the experts, mental and physical, so what do you got to help me cope? And they go, well, there's nothing. You've got good surgery. And I said, well, that's surgery. That makes you a plumber, an electrician, or a mechanic. But what do you got for my head up, my spirit, my mind, my feelings? Nothing. Well, I knew I could do better than nothing. So I defined resiliency as our ability to improve the quality of our journey and often improve the outcomes. So there's a rational, emotional, physical, and spiritual loss. So if I'd have died the first go around with my cancer fight, that would have been not fun, but it would have been much easier if I'd have had some skills. And we lost our lead. So I'm just going to keep going.
Carry on, Michael.
Don't dial in. And so I've learned that you can have different outcomes in different areas of your life. So for argument's sake, when I was 27 and I had the cancer, if I'd have physically died, I believe that with my attitude and skills and rational, emotional, and spiritual viewpoint and fight, I could have died, but I would have left a legacy of hope to those left behind, so that yes, I'm really ill, and yes, I'm going to physically lose, but I'm still winning because only my body lost, and I didn't go down in 100% defeat. I only physically died. So I put the definition in there. Resiliency, as I define it, is our ability to improve the quality of our journey and often improve the outcomes. So for those of us who have had friends go to palliative care, as you said earlier, lost a relationship, it can be really tough. And so it's really important if we know that we have choices. And to me, that's the biggest thing of all, is that with resiliency, it's choices. So without our moderator and lead panelist, we're going to fly and wing it.
Michael, why don't we share with people who are listening about some of our experiences, our stories, personal stories with working with other people in moments of crisis and how we held space for them. May I start?
Please do.
Thank you. Part of my practice is working with palliative care, and it is something that I lovingly fell into because I've carried patients and held space for them for so many years. And my senior population, senior patients, are reaching a time of transitioning. And I had two patients that deeply moved me. One, her name was Eleanor, and I was lucky enough to treat not only her, but her daughters and their children. So it was a big family affair. When Eleanor reached her end of her beautiful, magnificent life, she actually asked me if I could be present. And my role at that moment was to hold her hand and to assist her and support her in coming to a deeper place of peace. When she did pass, she passed very, very peacefully, almost with a little smile on her face. But it was her family that was left behind, broken and in a deep state of grief, because Eleanor was the matriarch of the family. She was the mover and the shaker. And so my practice was to be present, which is one of the key points that I would like to emphasize on how to regain the resilience and to foster hope, is to be very present. And you and I had a delightful conversation yesterday, and we were talking about that principle of when we get stuck in our grief from our loss and reflect so much to the past, it will only generate depression and regret and a deep sense of attachment and loss. When we start to ruminate about the future, and it's also this future of not having that person or that thing in our lives, it creates anxiety, and it can cause many physical symptoms, this emotional negative stress with emotions. And of course, so the Buddhist and the Eastern philosophical moment will say, be here now.
Yes.
Be here now in this beautiful present moment where the past does not exist. The future has not come, and we have this moment. So be here now, which was the mantra. Hi, Janelle.
Here, but I don't have anybody else. I don't see them.
Hello. We can see you. We can hear you.
I think she's frozen. I'll just carry on.
Yeah. Keep going.
So the quote, be here now, in order to stay centered. And from this place, we can make choice.
Yes.
And the most powerful force, as you and I both know, is love. And love trumps everything. Love trumps every negative emotion. And so be here now, and to focus on love and be deeply grateful and appreciative for the present moment. So that's the first step. And I have two more, but I'll hand it over to Michael. What's your number one?
Well, I go back to rational, emotional, physical, spiritual. And I love the quote that I learned years ago, that we're all spiritual beings having a physical journey.
Love that. Love that.
And so one of my resiliency lessons that came to me in the guise or disguise of a 5-year-old, the 5-year-old witnessed some terrible, terrible violence. And so I'm a big believer of what Peter Alsop from California talks about, that as adults, we are supposed to be the carers and the nurturers. And the school system wanted to kick this little boy out of school because he had behavior issues after the domestic violence he witnessed. So it's bad enough that the family he was born into, out of love, has erupted in violence, and he saw things that none of us should have to see, never mind a 5-year-old. So I talked to him about stuff that he'd gone through and experienced, big stuff. And I'm not here to tell you right or wrong or good or bad. I just want to talk about you being calm and having peace of mind despite. So not to chastise the 68 experts at the school that are behavior experts in the system who are victimizing him by kicking him out of school again. He's the 5-year-old. We're the adults. It's up to us to help him go through the journey with some more peace. So we taught him some basic skills, and we taught him about no judgment about his feelings and his energy. And I use the word energy as opposed to feelings because it's safer. Feelings have attachments of good and bad and negative and positive. So we just talked about loud, fast, quiet, and slow. So for the people watching or listening, what's the language you describe yourself and others with? Does it build and elevate, or does it block and tear? And so part of resiliency for me is the language of acknowledgement. We've got to acknowledge and engage with ourselves that maybe we're having a bad day or a bad year or maybe a bad decade. But we're acknowledging it. We're not saying I'm really stupid and I deserve all this. We're just saying we're having a bad time. Now, on occasion, we make mistakes and maybe things happen to us that we set ourselves up for. Rob a bank because you couldn't meet budget. Well, that's a bad thing and you're going to have grief when they catch you. But have a genetic health issue, you've done all you can to manage, then that's a whole different story. So I'm really big. One of my first steps is, what is the language you have to describe your current situation? So for that little boy, we tried to get rid of the blame in his language, and you know, within 5 sessions over 10 weeks, we taught him some calmness skills. We gave him some audio bedtime stories, and he displayed no symptoms later. Gone in 5 weeks.
Fantastic.
So resiliency starts with language and beliefs, and then we go forward. And that helps us deal with, as you said, about past, present, and future. It gets us to take a better look or another look at how we're coping and how we should move into thriving.
Love that. Love that. Well done.
Thanks.
Shall I do my number 2? Then you'll
I
do your
think she's
number 2.
not frozen again with us. I'm not taking it personal if she can hear me.
We'll carry on.
Yep.
So my second gem to foster resilience is the power of the breath. And Michael, again, I believe you and I are on agreement with this one. And breath is life. When we express our last, then there is death, which is a transition. So in deep grief, according to traditional Chinese medicine, grief is stored in the lungs. And so when we are grieving deeply, our lung capacity is diminished because we are so emotional. There's heaviness in the chest. We have all these physical symptoms: heaviness, suppression, and a curling up. So what I do to coach people in these deep places of loss is to put their attention back on their breath, to bring it back to the present moment. Again, be here now, and the breathing. And with the breath also comes the expression of the emotions. And of course, crying is natural. Crying is absolutely natural and necessary. However, prolonged grief and a looping of loss is detrimental. And it will have physical ramifications. Disease is dis-ease, and the body expresses the emotions, hopefully. It's our responsibility to express them in a loving way. Grief is one of those things that needs to be expressed. So breathing is a way of rejuvenating, but it's a way of expressing these emotions. Through the breath will come the tears. So through the breath will come the sounds. Through the breath will come just rawness. And then the recapturing of the deeper breaths and the recapturing and the expansion of the breath will allow the body to rejuvenate. Because in Chinese medicine, there's 3 ways of rejuvenation: is through the breath, through digestion, and through cultivation of life force energy that you're born with. It's called qi, life force energy, qi. So we need to always keep the qi moving. So my second gem is to breathe, which supports the be here now and the expression of the emotion and the energy through the breath.
I totally agree. One of the things I did with the young man I alluded to earlier was once we got the language of loud, fast, and quiet and slow sorted out, we talked about breathing.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, people that know how to, because I'm dealing with a 5-year-old that's very stressed.
Mm.
And so I said, belly breathing is one of the major things we do to manage our energy. Now, I was blessed to take Shaolin Kung Fu as a teenager for 3+ years. So I taught him diaphragmatic breathing, to use the technical term, belly breathing, to put it in 5-year-old terms. I'm a big believer on using language that captivates and pull you in. And so I had him wiggle his fingers together to remind you that your thinking, your feelings, your body, and your spirit are all woven together. And then you put your thumbs together, because we're interconnected, all those, and gently put them on your belly button. Of course, I'm dealing with a 5-year-old, so language is key. Did you know that your belly button is where the extra lint goes if it's too much between the toes?
That would work for an adult too.
Absolutely.
Oh, that's so sweet.
One of my advisors was a paid manipulator. My words, not his. He was in advertising for 30 years. So he talks about a little hook when I deal with clients. Can you give them a little hook now and again on a skill that's really important? So that's my hook, that if you got lint in your belly button, it's probably because between the toes is all filled up, and the extra goes to your belly button.
That's cute.
So by teaching him belly breathing, it changed him. We gave him other skills, but the belly breathing for him was his favorite, I think, because of the lint comment. But fast forward 3+ years, and the mother and him call me at the end of grade 3. They'd just come from a school meeting with the school teacher, and the teacher said, "This young man changed my career, and changed the class. This young man at the beginning of the school, when I said, at the end of September, we're going to start doing little tests, because that's part of being a child, part of being in school, and part of being an adult is you got to do tests. So I want them to be fun, not sad or serious, just fun." And he said, "This little man put up his hand, and he started doing what some would say behind his back was being a keener. He had to tell me something. The hand was waving," she said. So I said, "What would you like to tell the class?" "Oh, it's really important." So he marched up to the front of the class and stood in front of the class, and he said, "My friend Michael said that when you use belly breathing, it helps your brains come out on the test."
That's adorable.
What that led to was, teacher was wise to practice belly breathing with the whole class standing up, wiggling their fingers together, putting their thumbs together, and doing 3 belly breathings. In on 4, hold for 2, out on 4. In on 4, hold for 3, out on 4. In for 4, hold for 4, 4 seconds, by the way, out for 4. He said, "I didn't have one test all year where somebody had to go to the bathroom 3 times. I had no negative behavior." He had the whole class right here where I wanted them, in the palm of my hand. Because if you practice your belly breathing and get calm and manage your energy, it helps your brains come out on the test.
Beautiful.
So I don't want a tombstone. I want to be cremated. But if I had a tombstone, I think that'd be a great saying. He helped brains come out on tests.
Oh my goodness.
So for me, you're right. For words, definition, and then skills. You talk about breath. I talk about belly breathing. We're talking the same thing. Yours, some would say, is a more refined approach, and that's fine.
That works.
Oh, sure. So what's your next one?
The third one is to spend time in nature. And in traditional Chinese medicine, it evolves around the principles of the 5 elements. So the 5 elements are the fire, the earth, the metal, the water, and the wood. So we are all of these elements. And so when there is a disharmony in the elements, we ask to go into nature in order to receive the energy that is missing, and any energy that is excessive within us, it can be harmonized. So for me, you and I, Michael and I, had a nice conversation last night to discuss prominent or dominant elements And it is so obvious that Michael is fire. He is so fire. And I am predominantly earth, which is grounding and more like mother earthing. And so therefore, for Michael to be more balanced, it'd be very beneficial for him to be in the woods where he's got bare feet planted on the earth and rejuvenate within the woods, to smell the green, to be rejuvenated by the freshness. And so for me, actually, I'm fire and earth. What I lack is water. And so I'm always attracted to water. And so for me, if I am sad, the place where I will naturally go to is the beach. So
Right.
I happen to live in Vancouver, which is we're very close, live very close to the beach. So it's nice. So for people who are grieving, I say, find your sanctuary in nature, whatever feels good, because intuitively we're going to go where we need to be. Some people just want to sit outside in their garden. Some people just want to go through the woods. Some people want to be the water. But I will mention there's one element that seems to be odd, but I will explain how this is important, and it is metal. The lungs, which is associated with the emotion grief, is the metal element. And I just posted something on Facebook. It is a beautiful video by an amazing man who was talking about the power of the vocal, the power of language, and how, how some areas of the world, they have different toning in their language. For instance, the Hindu mantras, like it would say Om Tat Sat, which is a mantra that means that we are one. As the tongue hits the top of the palate, it creates a vibration. Every time we talk, there's a little vibration happens, and it sends a vibration through the brain and through the rest of the body. And each mantra has an effect. Well, the sound of metal, like a bell or a beautiful Tibetan bowl and you hit it, or if you use a Tibetan metal bowl and you do this and it goes, well, that's you find your sound. It's very soothing. It's metal, soothes the lungs. It soothes moments of grief. So I say, find your music, find your sound, find your vibration that offers you a sense of comfort. And I have lots of different Tibetan bowls, and I will ding. So when someone is just going to this place, it creates this clarity. Again, we want to create this balance again. So my third gem is balancing the elements within you by seeking the elements in nature. In nature, we can ground. In nature, we can rejuvenate. We need the fresh air. We need to see, visually be stimulated by the greens, the colors, the sound of the ocean, the way, how the waves come in, very soothing for some people, the sound of the birds, things like this. So the first one again for me is to be here now. The second one is going to be paying attention to the breath. And the third one is rebalancing with the elements in nature. Michael.
Thank you.
So I talked about language and beliefs and using non-judgmental language. I talked about breathing is really important. But the next step for me, nature's important, but movement outside of breathing. So in working with all ages, and I've worked with some special needs kids and some special needs seniors, and just about all the types of humanity there is getting them to move. But at the risk of sounding like I'm trivializing it, do it in a gamification. So I don't teach meditative walking. I teach turtle walking. And you walk slowly and carefully, heel to toe, heel to toe. And you bend your knees to lower your center of gravity for two reasons. If you walk really slow, you don't have as far to fall. But also, it's making you more mindful of heel to toe. And I say to people, feel your toes in your shoes or on your sandals. If you have a safe place, do it in bare feet. But heel to toe. And I've worked with some kids with anger issues. I've worked with some people who have other behavior issues. I had a young man with my first ODD, oppositional defiance disorder. Well, you didn't have to talk about family history long to find out the house burnt down. There was other family issues that were awfully big. This young man had every right to have what I would say, to use old words, his dukes up. You got nothing to teach me. I've had enough. Leave me alone. I'm 7. So we taught him turtle walking. We then taught him slow racing. So Janelle, you and I on one side of the room to the other side of the room, you got to walk as slow as you can. The last one there is the winner.
Right. Right. Perfect.
So we're getting people in touch with their movements, and of course it slows their breathing down. They're being mindful of what they're doing, but they don't know they're being mindful. They don't know they're doing meditation. We're doing turtle walking, or I have different versions. I have a silly chicken walk. It's just integrating movement that's slow and calming. So to use my energy words, they're practicing quiet and slow energy. And it's amazing how the young man with Tourette's, we took him from triplets to duplets in less than 3 hours. And it stuck 24 hours later. He was still only doing doubles with everything. But he was 12 years old. Nobody had ever given him a skill for calmness. So that's my number 3 is movement. That's
great.
And
thank you.
And if we've got somebody that's got the other end, it's not, don't have anger and anxiety that's coming out at high speed, then we have the opposite where you go faster. So I won't do loud and fast clapping, but I have pretend loud and fast clapping. That puts up my blood pressure. That increases my heart rate. So when I had a young mom who had a very ambitious young 3-year-old and was sort of not happy that the newborn was getting more attention, Mommy would take him aside and practice fast, non-loud clapping when they like something on TV. Cheer them on. Cheer them on.
Yeah.
And so
wonderful.
Movement is my 3rd one.
Wonderful. And I apologize that I missed most of the conversation, but I think everything is working now. One of the things that I had on my mind, and much like both of you, is I don't take a cookie cutter approach with my clients when I'm helping them work through grief. It's very much about respecting the individual space and the experience. And so I tell people I don't do therapy. I facilitate grief. Is what I do. It doesn't need to be diagnosed or treated. It needs to be facilitated. And so probably my top choice to say to people is grieve like a child. And because people will say children are resilient, and I think they are resilient, but I think we should be saying, when did I stop becoming resilient? When I became an adult. And when I've watched children, my own children included, when my husband died and they were young, and my brother died and his children were young, but when I'm watching them, children have such a natural rhythm to their grief. They allow themselves to feel the pain and they take a break from it, right? They cry, they're sad, they may have some behavior issues, and the next thing you know, they're playing, they're outside riding their bike, they want to have their friend over for a pizza and a movie, and then they'll be sad the next day. So I say to people, grieve like a child, allow yourself to pace your way through this and step away from your grief a little bit when you can, so that you can go the distance. So pacing yourself is big for me to encourage people to do that. And along with that pacing then ties in with what you say, Michael, the mindfulness, the opportunity to reflect and to spend time with yourself and look at those feelings. The other is being sure to surround yourself with supportive people who will honor and respect where you're at and not attempt to rush you through the process. Right? And it's not about fixing it. It's not about getting over it. It's about respecting where you are.
And you just said something that's really a big one for me, and that's the speed of how we all deal with grief.
Right. Yeah.
I remember
there's no time frame.
No, some of us do.
Go ahead.
Days or weeks or months, but some it's months, years, and borders on a decade for a couple of people I know when they lost the love of their life. And I just tried them, as Dr. G said earlier, it's good to remember the past, and it's okay to reflect on the future, but if we could have more now, maybe the grief would be less intense and hurt less, and you get more sleep.
Right. Well, and I say to people, you know, the biggest challenge for me, I was 34 when I was widowed, and my brother died the year before that. My father died as well, so I was fairly young. But I had to give myself permission to live and forgive myself for being the one left here to live. And so I work with people to do that. It's about finding that forgiveness of self and knowing that you deserve to live until you die. My family lived until they died. They may not have, and none of us would want to die at that age, but they lived and did what they wanted to do until then. And so I had to give myself permission to do that too. So it doesn't mean that I don't miss them, and that still 25, 26 years later, there's days where I feel that pain and that yearning to be with them. But I also know that I have an obligation to my children, who are adult women now, and I have 3 beautiful grandsons, that they came after that pain, but they deserve to have the best grandmother that they came here to get. And if I don't do my work of healing and, you know, working and integrating those losses, I cheat them out of having the best of me.
Yeah, 100% agree. Absolutely. And you're modeling how they can cope later in life.
Absolutely. And I think, you know, this is something that we need to get on the table more and more with children, not about frightening them, not about, you know, but I mean, children live in a society that has a lot of loss. You know, divorce is rampant in our society, and separation, and we should be talking about it. We should be teaching them how to cope and role modeling for them. So because that is probably the biggest tragedy in life for me, is that we can't prevent loss from happening.
Exactly.
Maybe in this case, then there is definitely a need to foster compassion. Because as an example, I had an adult male on my table who had a realization that the divorce of his parents at the age of 9 has created this repeated story of abandonment and anger. And how it plays out now as an adult is that when any situation he's in where he's up against people who are in places of authority, he feels threatened by them, and it's always their fault. So, you know, here's the parents have divorced, and he's got all this unresolved grief in his heart for it. And when I suggested compassion, he didn't even know what that meant. He didn't know how to feel that, right? So, you know, I think our modern world also needs the education of what is compassion and forgiveness. And I love what you had to say, Janelle, about, you know, you having to give yourself some compassion, forgiveness for being the survivor of all this. Your life will continue. In Buddhism, they talk about that change is inevitable. And, you know, what do they say? The biggest one is pain is inevitable and suffering is optional. So pain happens all the time. Loss is a part of life. And how do we continue? And how do we do it gracefully? And how do we do it with inspiration?
And I think, sorry, I was going to say, along with that compassion is teaching people what is true empathy.
Yes.
Right. It's not the same as sympathy, and people don't want you to feel sorry for them. They want you to understand and respect where they're at. And empathy is not about rushing somebody through the process and fixing it for them. You don't have to fix it. And so, you know, one of the things that, you know, comes up for loss is people saying, why me, why him, why our family? And I say to people, you don't have to answer the question why. You don't even try to answer the question, because you will never make the answer they need. Facilitate their grief, and they will find the answer that's meaningful and works for them. So empathy is about being with them and not feeling sorry for them, and also not trying to fix it or rush them through the process.
100% agree.
Yeah. And what do you feel about children in terms of their resiliency? Because sometimes I feel that people dismiss children in loss by saying, oh, they're resilient, they'll bounce back. And I think they do, but I think we do need to embrace them in the conversations as well.
Yes, 100%. When my daughter's great grandmother, when I got to be 85, I decided it was time to start doing some preemptive work with them on grief. And so one of my favorite books for kids is The Fall of Freddie the Leaf. And so when great grandma died when they were a little bit older, my oldest summed it up quite nicely. So basically, great grandma's brain's gone to heaven and her body's in the ground.
Oh.
Yeah, you could say that. He said, okay, I get it. That works. Now, can we go to a graveyard and see where all the bodies are?
Right. Right.
It wasn't morbid. She was just really curious. And only
Yeah.
because she had great aunts around that couldn't cope with having a 6-year-old at the graveside or the funeral that she didn't go. It wasn't her ability to cope. So we did 3 different graveyards. One was a pioneer graveyard. All the grave tombstones were more than 100 years old. And she was quite enthralled that, wow, their body's been in the ground a long time. I said, I wonder if their spirit looks the same as the day they were born or the day they died up there. So we had, to me, really incredible conversations.
Yeah.
So that was it.
Yeah, we should not be afraid of those teaching opportunities with children. They are resilient, they're very intelligent, and they're much more open to it than we believe. And I had that opportunity a few weeks ago. My first husband was a police officer, and he was killed in the line of duty. And we had a police officer here killed last spring, and young mom, 2 kids, and they unveiled a plaque at the local detachment for her. So I wanted to be there for the family, and I took my eldest grandson, who's 10. And of course, he did not know his biological grandfather, but we talk about him and they see pictures. But it was a great teaching opportunity for him and I to stand there and talk about why this was important for people to have a place to come and remember her, to honor her, and to pay tribute to her family, and why it was important for her children to have that connection. And it didn't put any fear into him, and it was emotional for us, but it wasn't sad. But it was just, like you said, Michael, it's those great conversations that you can have, and I feel like it empowered him in some way, and the newspaper actually came over and interviewed him, and he did great at 10 years old and responded to his feelings for this family who we did not know. Right? So people shouldn't be afraid of it.
That gave the family that had this new recent loss a sense of support in the community, because you showed up and you talked about it gently, but it's a very powerful support, I think. And
it was powerful to show him, to be there for other people, even if you don't know them, to understand what they're going through, and that it's okay to step back from your own life to give them that support, because long-term and short-term supports are extremely important for people who suffered a loss, right? And the short-term support is what really comes in a huge wave at the beginning, and then that starts to settle down. And the work I do with people often is because they feel abandoned down the road, that their grief is still there, but the rest of the world has continued on. So, and in some way, I hope that I taught him something about that too.
I'd say you did a lot.
I agree with both of you. I think that we should never underestimate the power of a child. And especially now in this modern time with social media the way it is, kids are way smarter than I can ever imagine. And they're exposed to so much more. I think also in our humanity as it is, especially in the Western part of the world, there is a loss of community. Like in Asia, for instance, in China, the grandparents live with the kids. And the grandchildren, the great-grandchildren, everyone is together. They're not segregated, but they are here in North America. The kids are in daycare. I understand why. Grandparents are in care homes. I understand why. But there is a loss of that heart connection within the family. And children, children are just, I love what you said, Janelle, about, we could look into them for their guidance in resilience. Just watching 2 children fight. They go, I hate you and want to see you. 2 minutes later, you want to go out and play? It's like they get through it very quick, right? In some spiritual conversations, we say that, children, because of their innocence, are closer to God. They're not tainted as much. So I think we should really share with them exactly what's going on. And of course, every family has their own belief systems, their own spiritual beliefs, or whatever it is that they believe in. Absolutely important. In the Buddhist faith, depending on what kind of Buddhism, they would put pictures up of those who are deceased, and they will light incense in honor of the ancestors. And a lot of the shamanic cultures will do this as well. But there are other spiritual groups that believe to hang on to the belief of the past ones, the ones who passed over, holds them back spiritually. And so what they want to do is, like, when someone dies, it's a celebration. They wear the bright colors and everyone's laughing, and they're rejoiced because the one who has departed is closer to God or with the spiritual family. And so we need to move them forward, right? So it's interesting to see the different kinds of ways on how different types of humanity and how they deal with the loss. I think we can learn a little bit from everything, from everybody.
I think we can, and I think from the past as well, because what you said about community, I think is so important. And, you know, our community so much is about social media now. Like, we have hundreds, if not thousands, of friends who we've never seen face to face. And if you go back 100 years ago, if there'd been a loss in a family, the entire community knew, even if they didn't know the family. Yeah. And that was partly because you would dress in black, you'd have a wreath on the door, it was announced in the church. It activated this natural support system. And now we don't even know our neighbors, who they are, what their names are. We would not know if the person across the street from us had a death in the family or were going through a really traumatic time in their life. And so somehow getting people to go back and get to know your neighbor a little bit and know people face to face, because we really need to have that face to face support when we're going through loss, as well as I think social media has a great place to help people, because a lot of work I do now is in brain injury, and it has opened up a whole world for people who are typically isolated, where they can have a voice and make friends. But when it comes to loss, people do need that personal connection.
Hugs.
Yes.
You know, I break all the rules, Janelle and Michael. In my profession, we're not even supposed to hug our patients because it borders on inappropriateness. But I hug everybody. And, you know, when you're hurting, you don't have to say anything, just that hug, you know, the heart to heart, that's what it is. The vibration of the heart is so healing. And children too, you know, hug them. And when you're holding hands and holding the hand. Yeah.
I've had two surgical experts in my life due to all my cancer battles, and both of them had the same physical approach. So when you've had large incisions, hugging's out of the question. Both of them would come in the morning and gently hold your big toe for a minute and say, "Good morning, Michael." And then a little tiny little pressure to let you know that they were paying attention. It's good to see you up. Now, how are we? And then they'd let go and they would carry on. But it wasn't a hug, but it was a connection like nothing I've ever had before. And they did it every time they saw me, and I was stretched out in recovery. And it was really something, that human touch.
Yeah, absolutely. So just before we kind of wrap it up, I wanted to talk about healthy coping skills, because I think resiliency is really dependent on that, and people can be taught unhealthy coping skills. And so a lot of what we have to do is examine family of origin. And I say to people, you know, like, let's talk about how your parents coped with things, how your grandparents cope with things. And in there will be some forgiveness, because they're only teaching you what they had been taught. Absolutely. And so if that hadn't worked for you, we have to find something different. So, like, when I think about healthy coping, it's about being able to manage your emotions and finding appropriate ways to relieve the stress and the sorrow, whether that's nature, listening to music, journal writing, talking to somebody, integrating, like activating some meaningful activity, movement, all of those things. What would you say to people if you're talking to them and you quickly can learn that they have some very unhealthy coping skills? How do you help them to turn that around?
You know, if someone, I'm sorry, Michael.
Oh, you go ahead.
You know, we all need to share. And so when I see someone who's lost, and you find out that they're drinking heavily, they are self-medicating with marijuana, alcohol, food, you know, so they're looking for a connection. Gabor Mate, who is an addiction specialist, he talked about how addiction is a lack of connection. So I believe in every city, there's some wonderful resources for people with loss. And I think it's important that we activate or access this, whether it is your own family, your community, your friends, but there's other options as well, government options, people who are isolated. There's phone access, that crisis centers and whatnot. I think it's important. We need to express. So there needs to be this human connection. There needs to be a reach out. And so when I work with families who have lost, I always say to the friends, I said, in 1 week, your life is going to carry on as if this person nothing ever happened. But the people who have lost are going to feel that for years to come. I said, please reach out. So I ask people, please check in, ask the community to check in with these people. And when I'm working with clients who are going through loss, I said, we're here. I'm here for you. And you have to look inside your heart, reach out, ask for help, ask for help. There's no shame in asking for help because we all feel pain, all of us. Every emotion, human emotion, we all feel it, but just at different degrees. So when you have this loss right now, it's like it's intense, but we all know what it's like to feel like we've lost something. I said, so I kind of like humanize it and soften it, ask them to reach out. Because as you both know too, unless it's very serious, we can't interfere with a person's process. We can't rescue them. We have to hold space. Holding sacred space is allowing and witnessing and loving and comforting, right? That was my.
I agree, and I think what you said was perfect about connection. And like I said, a lot of the work I do is in brain injury, and so this is people who are there, and you're not publicly invited to mourn the death of that person, although their personality is no longer the same. So I say to people, strive for connection, not perfection. And I tweeted about this today, was saying, life wasn't perfect before your loss. Why are you expecting it to be perfect after? Strive for connection.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's that sense of connection. So me being me, I've said to a few clients that are going through big stuff, I said, have you considered volunteering for 90 minutes a week? It'll get you in the moment. Go to teach kids how to read. Go to read books at a senior's home. Do something for somebody else.
Yeah.
Because it takes the emphasis on I've lost to I can help.
Being of service.
Yeah. And I think it's like getting caught up in, I have to fix this, I need to work through this, I need to get back to who I was before. And I say to people, and I say it with, sincerity and not being flippant, but I said, grief is like dirty dishes. It is going to wait for you. Like, you can just take a step aside from that. But I say, just like you, Michael, go do something nice for somebody else. Like, be there for them just for 30 minutes. It will elevate your mood. It'll give you a sense of purpose and good feeling and give you something to hang on to, right? And so everything I try to do is like, can I get you to hang on for one more day? And then tomorrow it's going to be another day, and I'll get you to hang on for another day. And then next thing you know, a year has passed. So yeah, I agree. Doing something for other people is a huge benefit when you're going through loss yourself.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay, so we're right at 5 o'clock. So I want to thank both of you. I'm sorry about the glitches that we had. I hope that we could have this conversation again. And I appreciate all of our listeners tuning in. And, I'm going to turn it over to both of you for a final thought, and then we can say our goodbyes to everybody.
My final thought is never underestimate the power of the human spirit. Hope comes from here. Always go here. Breathe, connect, spend some time in nature. And may love be your power and your grace.
Thank you.
Thank you. And so my thoughts are to take the conversation a little right or left, is that when we're going through serious loss and grief, do something that others don't understand. And that is, as I said to one group of chronically ill who'd all had 10 years or more of big, tough, life-altering circumstances, if you look in the mirror and you haven't had any fun recently, whose fault is that? Don't wait for fun to fall in your lap like a bushel basket. Oh, I found some fun. No, go out. It sounds strange. Plan on having a joy night. That's where you don't spend money, but you look for things to be joyful about, a sunrise or a sunset. Go for a walk in nature and be amazed at what a leaf looks like on a tree, the texture. No. I remember when I was fighting after I'd had a medical procedure fail and I almost died and I finally got home. We had a PG-18, Robin Williams presentation night. Naughty, and it was rude, and it's not for everybody. But for me, Robin Williams, despite having all the incisions and new healing taking place, I laughed so hard I hurt for days. But it was such a healing time because he talked about everything we don't talk about in society, and he made it laughter and rude and funny, as sexuality, divorce, you name it. It was Robin Williams off the top. But wow, what a healing time. So do it on purpose. Don't wait for it to happen.
Yeah, laughter is huge. Patch Adams was my favorite movie of all time, I think, for that. So I agree with both of you, and I think my final message to people is to, follow your heart. Get out of your head and get into your heart to do this work. That's where the work has to be done. Be like a child, and, and if you're having a hard time being in the moment, be with a child. That's what I love about being with my grandchildren. They don't care how many book covers I've got on the wall. They don't care about what I'm planning next week. They care about what I'm doing with them right now in the moment, and how much love I have for them then. So thank you to everybody. And for you, Tanya and Michael, thank you so, so much. And we'll do this again. And I want to say thank you to Roy, who's in the background, for saving the day. Yeah. So, and thank you to our listeners, and have a great day, everybody. Thank you.